ready for true happiness, for deep fulfillment, for feeling alive, on purpose, and in control of your life again? It's time to be the bold, brilliant, beautiful woman you were born to be. Welcome to the PurposeGirl podcast. I'm women's happiness and life purpose expert Karen Rockkind, and I'm going to teach you how to live on purpose, feel alive, and be happy in every aspect of life. I'm going to get real about my life and interview women who are living on purpose so that you can finally live yours. Welcome to the show. So when I was a little girl, I noticed that I started playing with the edges of my pillowcase. And I noticed this because a friend of mine pointed it out. And I hadn't even realized that I was doing it. And I didn't really know that there was anything wrong with it. And the fact is, at 44, I still do it because I've just realized that it's one of my coping mechanisms for anxiety that I've naturally had my whole life. But when my friend pointed that out, I definitely thought there must be something wrong with me. And so I would try to hide it. Sometimes I would take the wrapper of a piece of gum and I would fold it up into a point in order to kind of have some self-soothing. And of course, now these kids have these little spinner things. But this topic of kids and anxiety, kids and unhappiness, social media, and what's going on with kids not being able to know who they are and feel good about who they are. There's so much stress, so much pressure. We need to figure out what can we do for our kids. So any of you out there, if you are a parent, if you are a teacher, if you are an aunt or an uncle, any of the dudes out there that listen to this, or you just one day think you might want to be around kids and you might want to know, how do we support our kids in what's going on with the anxiety, with the depression, with the challenges facing kids today, then you definitely want to listen to this episode of the PurposeGirl podcast. And I have the best expert on the planet to help us with this. My dear friend and colleague and someone I went to grad school with, Renee Jain, is founder and chief storyteller of Go Zen. She's recognized as a pioneer in marrying technology and child psychology through her writing, product invention and development, masterclasses for parents, and children's advocacy. Renee works to build emotional intelligence in kids, including resilience, empathy, kindness, and critical thinking. Renee is a certified life coach and holds an MA in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. She's also a wife and a mom, and she can be found reading a comic book, doodling, sipping a cup of coffee in a quiet room in LA. Welcome, my dear friend, Renee.
Karen, I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you here. It's my honor. So Renee and I, there were very few people who had ever done this Master's of Applied Positive Psychology. And we were only in the 6th year ever of this program at Penn. And here was this fabulous woman, Renee, and we instantly, I feel like, whenever we both found out that we had married young, divorced young, and
the same
age, wanted to bring this information, it was like such a connection. And what amazes me about you, Renee, is you talked in class. You hadn't yet done work with kids, but that was your passion. And you always were bringing it back, no matter what we were talking about, bringing it back to wanting to bring this field of positive psychology, the science of human flourishing, back to kids. And what you've now done, it's blown up. It's so amazing. So let's first talk about what's going on with kids and anxiety and the challenges facing kids today.
Yeah, the statistics are really just alarming. So 1 in 3 kids will be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder by the age of 18 in the US, and the global statistics are not dissimilar, right? And so it is absolutely shocking to people whenever they hear that. They think, is that really the number? Is it because we're more aware of it? Is it because the diagnosis is different? And then when I tell them, no, it's not because of that, that's a number that is not because the diagnosis is different and we're more aware. So then everybody tries to figure out, well, what's going on? What is going on? Is it the social media obsession? Is it our obsession with perfection, right? Is it the overscheduling? Is it putting kids in the rat race so early? Is it helicopter parenting, right? We're being on top of them all the time. And I say, yeah, from my research and my professional work that I do with lots and lots of kids and lots of schools, I would say that those are factors, right? Those are contributing factors.
All of the above.
All of the above. But what all of that is doing to me is one thing, which is really the root of the issue. And the root of the issue is that we come into this world with a very, very strong inner voice. I know that you talk about coming into the world with a purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that this is unlike that. I think we come in listening to that voice, showing up authentically as who we are, and then getting into the rat race, showing up, to get good grades in schools that are a lot like grade factories often,
Mm-hmm.
having someone hovering above us all the time, having social media affect us. I think all of those things, what they do is they contribute to a disconnection from that voice. And this,
Yes.
to me, is the root of what is going on with our kids.
So each of us really coming into the world as we are, right? For some kids, that's going to be super gregarious and outgoing. And then maybe they're told, you're too loud, you're too right. Or for some kids, that might be being more quiet and being more introspective. And then maybe they're labeled as shy. And so they think they have to be different. Is that what you're saying? Is that?
And then for all kids coming into the world intensely, passionately curious with an intense love of learning. These are
Mm,
two strengths that every child has. I have yet to meet a child, especially the really young ones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. And you'd see it, if you're a parent or if you're an aunt or if you were ever a kid yourself, which I'm assuming that everybody was. You remember going for a walk and stopping to, touch a crack or lick the wall or sense do something because you're intensely curious about everything around you and you
yes.
have an intense level of learning that is not defeated by failing whatsoever. You never fell down once while you were trying to walk and said, you know what, I think I'm just going to give this up. It just
Yeah.
doesn't happen, right? You're intensely curious, you have an intense level of learning, and somehow those dissipate as you get older. And part of this,
Mm,
yes, so this is what I'm talking about. You come into the world with a very strong knowing of who you are and how you want to show up in the world. And that gets extremely confused when you get into all sorts of different systems, right? Where you're around other people and you're not really sure it's okay to be who you are, to voice your opinion, to be different. You're not sure of any of those things. You
right.
lose that balance, essentially.
Right. And it's so interesting hearing you because I think back to the little girl I was, who my mom says first showed signs of anxiety when I was 3. So I think, I've thought before, well, what does a 3-year-old have to be anxious over? Listening to you, though, I was in systems. I'm the youngest in a family. So there was already a very set culture of what is acceptable and not acceptable in that family. And came into a religious institution, came into all sorts of different, preschool, who knows? But there must have been some part of me that felt like I can't quite be myself and I've got to alter that. So the disconnect that you're talking about, what got you interested in this, Renee?
I experienced that disconnect myself, right? So I was 8 years old and chronically worried about what was going on around me, and I had so many what if questions going through my head all the time. I was an anxious kid. So what if I don't do well in the test, which would mean I don't get into a good college, which would mean, it always ends up in basically homelessness or
Right.
joblessness or prison. Like there's
Right.
like
A cardboard box under a bridge.
or yeah, you're a drug addict. Like, so catastrophic thinking would occur. But I was always anxious and I did not know what to do. And my parents are loving and compassionate and amazing and supportive, and they couldn't help. All they could give me was constant reassurance and trust me and you'll be fine and we love you. And it's beautiful and it's compassionate and they're full of love. But they didn't know what to do. And I saw that I was putting them in pain. So I just pretended eventually like everything was okay. Right.
Mm,
And there's no more disconnection than pretending like you're fine when you're not fine, right? Than feigning okayness, everything's
mm,
fine. Wait, what
mm,
about the test? What about the school? What about the friends? Fine, 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 fine. I essentially became an emotional stoic
mm.
and
Because
I
inside you're still,
suppressed. Oh,
yeah.
yes.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yes. So you have incredible turmoil within, and you're stockpiling pain basically, but you are showing up in the world with a smile on your face. And
Mm.
the only thing that can happen happens when you do that for long periods of time, which is your body begins to shut you down, right? So I started in my 20s having panic attacks. I went through, as Karen mentioned, I went through a divorce, and this wasn't supposed to happen to me, quote unquote, right? This wasn't part of who I perceived myself to be. And I never learned the skills of resilience. And so
Mm.
I just began to panic. And, you know, it's interesting. I think a quarter of panic attacks show up as cardiac symptoms at the ER. So I showed up at the ER saying I'm having a heart attack. And they're like,
Mm.
how old are you? You know, and I was in my early 20s. And so the doctor said, yeah, I don't think you're having a heart attack, but I'll run the tests. And he
Right.
came back and he said, listen, you are having a massive panic attack.
Mm.
And so it was that moment. You know, you ever have those moments of clarity where you can look or you look back and realize it was a moment of clarity that
Yes.
I just shifted in my own feet. And I said, I have to make a change because I've been doing the same thing for years. So I went to therapy and I'm lying sort of on the sofa, like with the iconic picture of like lying on the sofa with this guy who I really honestly, he looked like Freud. And he was
Mm.
kind of like stroking his beard and looking at me, and he was teaching me these amazing things. But basically, what he was teaching me was to non judgmentally feel my feelings and allow them to
Mm.
surface.
Mm.
And I just had this moment where I said, excuse me, but do you have a time machine? Because
Mm.
I don't understand why the little version of Renee could not have learned what you're teaching me right now. Because that child and every child I have met is sophisticated enough to learn these life skills because that's what they give you in therapy. They give you life skills. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, most kids don't have access to it, right? Only
Mm.
20% of kids who are experiencing anxiety will ever get access to a professional. So
Ooh.
80% of kids won't have access to it. But every child can learn these skills. And so that just set me on a path, you know, where I just said, I'm going to change careers. I left my tech finance background. I began to study. I got a coaching certification. As you know, we both went back to school, right? So I went back to school. I changed careers. And I said, I'm going to teach this stuff to kids and I'm going to do it in a way that engages them, which is cartoons. And so it goes on, we create animations and animated programs that are used by therapists and schools and parents to teach kids things I wish I learned when I was a kid. It's basically what I do.
Absolutely.
Things I wish I learned when I was a kid.
You know what? That might be the theme of all of our purpose, right? Things that we really wish we had known that now we want to, make into a career. So your Go Zen videos, I'm telling you all, these cartoons, they're not just like, it's a little amateur cartoon. I mean, this is like stuff that you would see on primetime television. I mean, that's how sophisticated you've created a whole other world with different characters and it's technology based and you use like really like interesting age appropriate jokes. Like it's amazing to me. It's
Thank
amazing to me and
you.
I learn every single time. So since so many kids need this, I know I needed it when I was a kid. What are the skills that kids need?
It depends how much time you have, but this is what I would say. The very first skill that we all need is a mindset change about stress and anxiety, right? Because for many, many years, through many, many industries and otherwise, we have been told that stress kills us, that
Mm,
stress kills and anxiety kills, and basically you should be a human that has no stress. Do you want to be stress free? Right? Stress free are words that are put together and hyphenated
mm.
often.
Take a pill,
This,
eat this,
yes, take a
do that.
pill, eat this, do that, and then you will have no stress. Having no stress is not a human goal. It's a non-human goal. You would
Mm.
not be human. You would be a dead person, basically. It's the goal of a dead person, right? It's not a good goal to have
No,
because
and it's not realistic.
it's not realistic and it's also not aligned with the science of well-being. You wouldn't want to be stress-free. Stress has advantages, right? And so
Hmm.
the first thing that we need to embrace is that we don't want to be stress-free. We want to stress better. We want to
Mm.
use our stress to our advantage. We want to understand it. And we want to understand that all emotions on the spectrum of human emotions are okay, and they can also be advantageous. So whether that be guilt, envy, jealousy, sadness, anger, even anger, even
Mm-hmm.
the much demonized anger
Mm-hmm.
can be good for you and can be a positive catalyst for change. And so once kids hear, you mean I don't have to be, what do you mean I don't have to have less stress? I've been told a million times I'm a worrywart, or I'm the worrier of the family, or I tell myself I'm the worrier, and I
Mm-hmm.
that's just the way I am. I was, that's part of our narrative. Even you said, since I was 3, I've been anxious,
Mm-hmm.
and we see it as something that's not right with us. So there obviously can be situations where our stress and anxiety are chronically in the part of the continuum of stress and anxiety that are maladaptive or not healthy for us, right? And for those things, we can use tools to bring them back into the place where we can use them to our advantage. So, step number 1 is embrace the idea that we need to stress better. Okay, that's the
Mm.
first tool.
And I feel like even to pause you right there, we need to like circle that, underline it. Listen, whether you have kids or not, this is for adults too. Stress better. And what I heard you say in there is that every emotion has its purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That it's okay. You wouldn't be human if you were never angry because anger tells you, uh-oh, I'm in violation here. And you wouldn't be human if you never felt guilty. It says, uh-oh, maybe I did something to hurt someone else. So this is super important. I heard 2 things in there. One is emotions are normal, and 2, stress better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, continue.
Yeah. Once we embrace that, now it is the work of and again, it's so interesting to me that kids come into this world with these skills, right? So the work that I'm going to suggest is to begin to reattune yourself with your feelings, begin to feel your
Mm.
feelings again. Okay, because for better or worse, we have been delivered the message again that big feelings make big people, grown-ups, feel really uncomfortable. Maybe you were sent to a timeout chair, because you were getting angry and you needed to make the big feelings go away and come back with the feelings that were acceptable. Maybe you're sent to a time in corner, this is the new
Mhm.
conscious way of doing it. And it's very loving and it's beautiful and there's stress balls and there's glitter jars. But unless we're explicitly explaining to kids and to grown-ups that it's okay to feel their feelings and in fact necessary, then there's no way to navigate through the rest of this process. So first, know your emotions are okay and they can even be purposeful, right? The goal is to stress better. Second is now we need to reacquaint ourselves with our feeling. The
Mm.
reacquaintance comes with our body because we essentially live in a neck up environment, right? Where we're sitting in our laptops all the time, or we're doing stuff that requires thinking in our mind. And when we have thoughts, we attack them with other thoughts. So if we have thoughts like, I'm so worried, I'm so anxious, then we try to counter them with other thoughts. And there is a lot of benefit to cognitive behavioral therapy, talk therapy, right? And a lot of it has to do with reframing thoughts and accuracy of thoughts. And it's beautiful work. And we use a lot of it at GoZen. But before that work, we need to look at the body. So
Mm.
emotions come into the body in different places. They did an interesting study, I believe it was a Finnish study, where they created heat signatures of where all the emotions come into the body. In anger, it's usually in your chest, your arms, and your legs. So the fight or flight response is probably responsible for that. In guilt, it's often a tightness in your chest, for example, right? And so what we need to do is we need to feel our feelings and figure out where they are showing up in our body. This is pretty intuitive to people if they think about where they feel stress. A lot of people feel butterflies in their stomach before they have to speak, right? Or then before they
Mm-hmm.
have to do
Mm-hmm.
something that makes them feel nervous. And so you see that it shows up in your body. So first, we teach kids to identify where is the emotion in your body. And then we move on to another tool from there. So the first thing is to
Mm.
know to stress better. The second thing is to reacquaint yourself with where you're feeling the feelings in your body. And then there's a lot more depth that goes into that, probably out of the scope of this conversation, but you can do a lot of other things with kids and they never come back to you looking like what, with the quizzical eyes, because kids are much more open. They ask a lot less questions basically than adults.
Mm.
But you can ask a child, for example, to give a color to stress and worry, to give it flavor, to tell you what it
Mm.
smells like. You give it dimension. It's
Mm.
not unlike What We Do at Gozen, they also popularized it in the movie Inside Out, where they created characters for each of the emotions. So, really, a personification can be really helpful in getting to know your feelings, even for adults.
Mm. Mm. This is so good. And I was just speaking with a positive psychology student actually about his 5-year-old daughter, and she wanted to watch that movie 3 times in a row
Mm,
because it gave her like, oh, I forget if it was sadness or if it was anger, whichever emotion it was, but it gave her something to hang on to. So when, and I'm taking this for an adult too, right? So whether it's a kid or an adult, and we actually allow ourselves to notice where it is in the body, what's the purpose of that? What's the benefit? What is that doing for us or for the child?
So this is indication to you that you're getting a message that needs to be listened to.
Mm.
When I work with teens, I tell them it's like a text message to your soul, like a text message to your body. Like you need to pick up
Oh,
the text and read it. It's
I love
sending a
that.
message. But if you are continually ignoring your feelings and continually ignoring your body, you're not going to get the message, right? Stress is
Right.
sending you a message. Like you were talking about, anger is a violation of your boundaries, essentially.
Mhm.
That's sending you a message. But if you have been taught that anger is bad, aggression is bad, right? But let's not
Mm.
conflate it with anger.
Mhm.
Emotions are good because they're sending you messages. Now, they're not your masters. You don't have to follow what they're saying, but you need to be able to read the information and make educated decisions. So, the
Mm.
reason for feeling it in the body is that you're like, oh, I'm having a feeling in my body, and let me identify what emotion this is and what it's trying to say to me, essentially.
Oh, I love this. I love this because when we can, everything is so fast, right? Even for kids, they're running. It's like school, soccer practice, homework, piano lesson. I mean, whatever. We're all running so fast. And if we've been told, as many of us have, that emotions are not okay or they're too much, it's like a slowing down
Hmm.
and a checking in. What is making me angry, or what boundary does it feel like I'm violating? And maybe that sounds like that's where you're going next, but this check in and being able to read it like a text, because then you actually can evaluate, is this something to be angry about or not? Right?
Yes. And, it becomes quicker. Because I've been doing this work on myself for so long, for example, guilt is a very, very, very quick signature for me. I get a tightness in my chest. I'm like, oh, that's guilt. What's guilt trying to say to me? I spent a little bit more time at work than I did at home this week or something, whatever guilt
Mhm.
is trying to tell me. And that is
Mhm.
sending me a message. Now, whether that's valid or not, that it comes at a later step. And what we do with that information, that comes at a later step. But yeah, that's basically what
Mm.
happens, and it becomes very quick if you practice it. And
Yeah.
basic mindfulness practices, basic meditation practices reattunes you with your body and your feelings inside of yourself, and so those can be things that help you facilitate this process.
So good. I love the question going into my body and saying, or my emotion, what do you want me to know?
Hmm.
So if I'm feeling anxious, that's been one of my tools is